first three speak about density of states. Second three speak about heat capacity. Last three speak about the magnetization. And in the triplets, first is speaking about ferromagnetic, second is speaking about paramagnetic, and the last speaks about antiferromagnetic was previously. Brief introduction as it is possible in 5 minutes is welcome, but try to stay within 5 minutes so that we match this deadlines and do not overuse time of each other. So if you are in the class, then you may notice there are PowerPoint presentations 1 to 3 up to 9, and you can just switch wherever your number and your presentation and go forward to present. I will give the microphone to the one who is presenting, and it looks that the first presenter is. Oh, I need to do a quick thing before we go forward. I need to make everyone to be co-host. Sorry for this little delay. Yes. Yes. So I did try to make everyone a co-host welcome, Professor Asurev. Thank you for joining.
Hello, everyone.
We already passed the introduction section, but if you have questions about the content, you can look through this PDF of the booklet. Okay, so the first presenter is CHEM759. So if you please start sharing screen, and floor is yours for 5 minutes plus questions.
Hello everyone. Now I think Dr. Killen's sharing the screen. Yeah, I will. So can you guys okay, nice.
Okay, please go forward.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Hui Kim, and today I will talk about visualize microstep plot of density of state of ruthenium under ferromagnetic conditions.
And speakers, please share, please unmute the camera. It is easier to follow if possible.
Yeah, like
Okay, yeah, that's great. Thank
you. Okay, perfect. Because it didn't work, so I tried to fix before that. Okay, sorry. Okay, let me start again. Okay, I will talk about visualize microset of plot of density of state of ruthenium under ferromagnetic condition. So because of time limitation, I was focused on the figures of result and conclusions. Okay, first figures show the logarithm of number of cases for number of downspins. So as you can see this graph, you can tell the shape of graph as parabola. And this shape of graph is really similar to the density of state graph at the bottom part of this. So both of then the shape of graph is parabola. And I want to mention that when the number of downspin is 0 here, the number of possible case is 1, but because it's put on the logarithm, this graph shows a 0. And this effect shows in the density of state graph too. So as you can see, the ground state, you can see the density of state is 0. So we can tell that these two graphs is related to each other. And it also shows that all spins are oriented at the same direction of the density of state graph. And figure 2 shows that the layered honeycomb of ruthenium chloride, and B shows a total of 32 atoms with 32 spins. And the number of up spins and down spin can be changed up to the energy of microstats, and the position should be changed according to the energy of microstat of this graph. And figure 3 shows the density of state versus energy of microstats graph depending on the value of magnetic field. So A shows that magnetic field is 0, and 2F graph shows that the magnetic field is 0.05, and all of them are the spin coupling constant is the same. So the value of magnetic field is increased, the energy of microstat is getting wider and wider. So it's a little bit hard to see, but the peak of each, the first A of peak is really small, but F is way bigger than that. So in the A graph, the peak range is about 0.01, but the peak range is almost about 1. And this figure shows the thermal energy difference. So when the thermal energies flip to the first spin, it's getting higher as value of magnetic field is increased too. So from these all three figures, the density of state versus energy graph result have been succeeded in showing the influence of effects of magnetic field, and it means that the result shows that the value of magnetic field is increased, the energy of microstat is getting broader and broader because of the magnetization effects. My presentation is done. So
yes. You hear there are applause in the audience. Please join me in applauding for a second.
Thank you.
Presentation is open for discussion. So anyone in class? Anyone online? So you can prepare your questions to other speakers. I will ask a brief one. Suki, which type of magnetic material were you modeling? Paramagnetic, antiferromagnetic, or ferromagnetic?
Ferromagnetic, because the spin coupling constant is less than 0.
Okay, thank you. More questions 1, more questions 2, more questions 3. Thank you, Suki. Done.
Thank you.
Please stop sharing.
Stop sharing. Yeah.
Yep. And next presenter is Christoph Brugger.
Okay, so today I'm presenting on the analysis of the ruthenium chloride density state when G over T is much less than 1, so when it's paramagnetic. And so ruthenium-3 chloride exhibits interesting photochemical and magnetic properties. As you can see, it is a 4D transitional metal with one unpaired electron on the ruthenium-3 plus. It's arranged in this nice honeycomb lattice, and the interlayers are stacked with the weak van der Waals forces, which allows them to be cleaved into thinner layers. It can be modeled as a kittia of quantum spin liquid, which allows it to be exactly solvable. However, as the size of the system increases, the number of spins increases, and the problem no longer becomes solvable due to the computational time that's necessary. And so fortunately, it can be solved because it follows a probability distribution, as you can see here, which was calculated using the equation for combinations. So it starts off very close to 0. When you hit 16 up, you hit approximately 15-ish, little over 14% of probability, so that's the highest charge. And since it follows this nice probability distribution, the Monte Carlo sampling method can be employed, which allows us to then calculate it from a much smaller sample and then be able to calculate these different energies and magnetization values. And so the method that we used was we input the parameters for each, we set up the boundaries, and then we generated random microstates and calculated the resulting magnetization, which can be calculated because of the sum of all the spins of a given microstate, and then the energy from the Ising Hamiltonian. And so what we found was that as you increased the magnetization value, which we classified as B, it resulted in the energy becoming distribution becoming wider, and this will correlate later on with Payman's findings, where when the which you can see here, when the spin-spin coupling constant is equivalent to your magnetic field, your energy range for your microstate, they're all very, very close to 0. Whereas as you increase your energy microstates, they distribute out and you start getting negative values as a possibility. We also did that where we decreased the magnetic field in relation to B, and again you see the same thing, is that the larger the magnetic field, the further they are from 0. And then we evaluated the impact of the unpaired number of spins on the energy of the microsystem. We first tried it with J equals B. However, that did not yield good results. So then we made our external magnetic field 10 times that of our spin-spin coupling constant. And then we did get the expected results, where when all of the spins are aligned with the magnetic field, you get your lowest ground state, which would be expected because everything's aligned. When we align all of the magnetic spins against the magnetic field, we actually get a value that is not exhibited within the density of the state graph generated using the Monte Carlo method. And this is because the Monte Carlo method doesn't exhibit all of the peaks. They only take 20,000 random ones that it picks. So those that have very low probability of being picked because they don't have very many ones where they're the same, they end up not being illustrated in this graph. So this is actually up here. And then likewise, when we have the microstate with 8 down spins, you can see that that is approximately halfway between that of all of them being downspin and half of them being downspin. So as we increase the number of unpaired electrons, because that's what this M1 represents, is how many is unpaired, we increase the energy. So likewise, when we have them half and half, so we have no unpaired, we end up right in the middle. And then once we have 8 extra unpaired electrons that are going against the magnetic field, as expected, that is about halfway up. And then, as I said, this one is no longer presented on the graph. And so in conclusion, we confirmed the expectation that the magnetic field increases as a resultant energy range of the microstates due to Zeeman splitting, and then that the energy of the microstates is dependent on the number of unpaired spins aligned against or with the magnetic field. And with that, I say thank you and ask if there are any questions.
You can see people applauding to you. Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Any questions any questions in the audience? Yes, John.
If you could go back a few, hello. If you could go back a few slides. Actually, forward one more. Sorry. Or second to last slide. Sorry. Yes. I guess my question is, what height are you expecting for the highest peak that's cut off? Like, I guess, like approximately, where do you think it would be on the y-axis?
On the y-axis, it should be, because it'd be the same probability as the A. It should be pretty close to this 0 mark, just like A is.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions in the class? Any questions from online?
I do actually.
Please do, Tyler.
Why is the kit of quantum spin liquid important in this research?
Oh, for KDF quantum spins allow you to actually be exactly solvable. Whereas, so quantum spin liquids are interesting because, and that's why we're interested in these ones, is they're materials that will allow for potentially levitation, will allow for a variety of uses so that you won't lose heat. But when you get to the KDF quantum spin liquids have the extra advantage is that they're exactly solvable on a tri-coordinated lattice. And so the only issue we have with like the sampling of our number of spins going up to 32, and that's where it's still exactly solvable, it's just the computational time to solve it would go on for too long. So that's why we use this probability distribution and use the Monte Carlo method to approximate the actual solution. Does that answer your question, or is it a different question?
That is great. Thank you.
I have a question for myself. So, Crystal, you have a peak A and the panel A when all spins are downwards. Other situations when the microstate with all spins downwards, you will not the minimal energy state, but something different. Can you please comment on that?
Yeah, well, like the one that I sent you when I was confused, Dimitri, was for the one where when we had the J equal to B, and that's where I was confused, and then we ended up making the magnetization 10 times greater, because then the spin-spin coupling overcame the ability of the external magnetic field, and my J value for my when everything was spin down was about here, when my J equals B, and my other values were actually not, so it wasn't the spin ground state.
Okay, and what if you just flip the direction of magnetic field? If you use minus B equals like minus 0.1 instead of.
Yeah, that would also affect it, because then it wouldn't be all aligned with the field anymore.
Okay, yeah, good. Any more questions from online? Oh, Steven, yes, please.
Working off of Dr. Killing's question about and your response, the situation when J is equal to E, did you notice a result that looked more like your panel C there, where you have an equal number of pairs, or all paired spins, or was it more similar to B or D? If you don't have an answer.
For when I did the J equals to B, I didn't do these type ones when I did J equals to B, because I was just starting at this point when I found out that it wasn't matching right.
Okay.
Okay, so please join me in thanking Crystal once again. You can stop sharing screen. Next presenter is John Kennedy.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Kennedy, and I was studying the effect of the external field strength, or in this equation, we'll talk about B, on the density of states, or the distribution of microstates for strongly interacting spins, in this case, when J is greater than 0. So a little bit of an outline. First, I'll talk about actually, I don't like being on this side. First, I'll talk about the motivation, how we're trying to realize alpha ruthenium trichloride as a spin liquid. And then secondly, how we get the population of microstates or the distribution of microstates when the spin-spin interaction, J, is greater than 0. And we look at that as a function of decreasing magnetic field strength. The system we're going to be looking at, as Crystal and Sophie had said before, we model it as a Kitaev structure, which is a two-dimensional lattice of interacting spins. In this case, they will be strongly interacting. And this can be extrapolated while ignoring chloride ions as a honeycomb lattice where each atom at the center of a point is interacting with its 3 neighbors. And one visualization I really like that kind of details the model we're doing is there's a very popular board game called Go involving placing down differently colored spots. And there's a version of this called Trigo, which is hexagonal, which is great because we're going to be modeling things hexagonally. And you can imagine one spin is black, one spin is white. So the Monte Carlo approximation method we did, every object or every nucleus in the lattice. Sorry, I'm going on too long for the outline. And then for the results, we generated density of states and a visualization of a microstate. So the motivation here, alpha ruthenium chloride has been proposed to act as a Kitaev quantum spin liquid. And these are very interesting because they've been proposed to be able to avoid spontaneous magnetization very, very close to absolute 0, k equals 0. And we're looking for how we can get information about the population of microstates of the spins in the lattice when those spins interact very strongly. And as you might have seen before, I am talking about J greater than 0, which is the anti-ferromagnetic behavior. J equals 0, like Crystal was talking about, paramagnetic, and J less than 0, so he said, is when the spins don't interact very strongly and they're outweighed by the magnetic field. And then we're going to probe the effects of the external magnetic field, and I apologize that B was centered, but in this equation here, this is the energy equation for the Ising-Hamiltonian, just the total energy of the system. And you can actually kind of see a nice balance of J versus the external field B. My case is when J is much, much bigger than B, and so we're going to be looking at how the interactions outweigh magnetic fields. So the system and methods we were using, a very wonderful visualization of the system itself provided by Dr. Gillen, shows, oh, from Stephen, I'm so sorry, I did not know that. Stephen Westra, photo credit on that. You can see, looking just at the ruthenium nuclei, the hexagonal pattern we're looking for. And so we define in that equation before J greater than 0, meaning they're interacting fairly strongly. And then we define an arbitrary external magnetic field, and during results I'll talk about what those values were. And then we go along, okay. And then we go along and we assign spins to every ruthenium nuclei on microstates. And then we can calculate magnetization, which is just the sum of the spins of all the ruthenium. And then from that, using the Ising-Hamiltonian below, we can calculate the energy. And then we make a note of this, and then we check how that affects some other parameters that I won't go into because it doesn't relate to my work. And then we flip one spin and calculate the measurables again. And we do this many, many, many times because we have 32 ruthenium ions there. We have 2 to the 32 options. And it's just not really realistic for us to do that by hand. And then after we've generated all of these, that's when we go back and we define a new arbitrary magnetic field. And I did 3 arbitrary magnetic field strengths I'll talk about. But this was the system we were doing. And here, this is a visualization where the sum of the spins on all the ruthenium ions is +1/2. So 2 things I was looking at for the results. One, visualizations of a microstate, and in this case, the only one I was able to successfully get to compute was a visualization where there are 4 extra spin up. Okay? 4 extra spin up spins for a total magnetization of +2. And also how the density or distribution of states is affected by increasing magnetic field, and we can see, or decreasing magnetic field, and we can see that as the magnetic field decreases in size, the energy splitting between our microstates gets smaller and smaller. And I suspect that as you would approach no external magnetic field, those would all collapse, as there would be no energy differentiation of the spin states. And then, this is an old one, I had something else. But I would also just like to talk about what the density of states is. As Sohi and Crystal said, it's just a distribution along a log function. So our ground states, the laser pointer here. Okay. The ground state would be all spins aligned with the magnetic field, and the energy separation would be how much energy is required to flip that. And I would expect, I didn't do this, but I would expect that as you drop the temperature closer and closer to zero, all states would end up occupying the ground state of the just all aligned with the field. And you could probably see at a certain temperature where those states would have enough energy to flip one spin. And so you would have just two peaks. And that is what I have. Are there any questions?
Okay, please join me in thanking John. Any questions? Well, no for the moment. Any questions in the class? Yes. See you.
Go back to slide 2. Yeah. There's the career point. How many microstates are similarly populated at the career point?
So at the Curie point, how many microstates are populated by it?
Yeah. So, oh boy. Actually, this is a question I was asked by Dr. Gillian yesterday.
Oh, okay. Sure.
For my class.
Okay. I would so I would say my coin flip answer would be that at the Curie point, there would only be one microstate populated. However, I'm not 100% certain about that.
Okay, so at zero temperature, for ferromagnetic it will be one.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
But at realistic temperatures,
okay, yeah, thank you. And let's check if there are more questions.
Sorry.
In class or wait, I will have one more question as well.
So I have two fairly trivial questions. In your report, you define G is equal to UNK. I do not believe you defined what
No,
UNK is.
No, I do not. I was looking at that as I got in here. That is a missed feature that I did not get on my revision. It was a placeholder. I apologize.
Second point, on your same slide that you're showing right now, you have a needle point listed for the anti-ferromagnetic conformation. Can you define what a needle point is?
As opposed to a Curie point?
Yes.
So, So, to the best of my understanding, which is not phenomenal, it has to do with the difference of material. I believe either something is going to have a needle point or a Curie point. I'm not certain what determines the properties of that material, whether it's Curie point or needle point. Gun to my head, I would imagine that something that interacts very strongly with itself, like the ferromagnetic behavior when the J is very strong, would exhibit a needle point, and things that don't interact very strongly would exhibit Curie point. Yeah.
I cannot say for certain whether that is expected successful. Would you agree with the following statement that a ferromagnet is a substance that has a frustration factor for the spin flip, either into or out of the magnetic plane of 1, and a antiferromagnetic material will be one that has a frustration factor greater than 1. That is, it prefers having a greater than average number of paired spins.
So I followed the first part. Could you go through the preference for antiferromagnetic?
We do agree that an antiferromagnet is a substance that prefers having its free spins, magnetic spins, preferentially paired as opposed to a ferromagnetic material which has a preference.
Oh,
on a
okay.
pair.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Good answer.
And did you have, if there are questions online, please speak. And I think there is one question from Professor Rasulov. How microstates were generated, randomly or systematically?
Oh, yeah, sure. So yeah, at first, it was a random function of how the beginning microstate was made. So the code we worked with would assign a random spin up, spin down to every. Oh, actually, no. Yes. So the original system we were working with defined a random spin for every ruthenium electron, or random spin to each ruthenium on the lattice, and then from this, magnetization was calculated, the energy of that microstate was calculated, and then some other things like how that microstate affected the ensemble energy and then change in energy overall. And so what we did actually, one spin in the lattice was flipped, and then energy of that microstate was calculated. And then if the energy did decrease, then we thought, hey, we were onto something. So that information again was saved as observables, and then the random flip was done again, energy was checked, and we kind of worked our way towards the value that way. If the energy value in turn actually increased, then that result was kind of thrown out, and we went back to the previous one, flipped the spin, and cycled through that way. If that was not just an in-program example.
Okay, yeah, thank you for answering. So we finish this discussion. Unless there are more questions. I know we are going over time. Can you please forward?
Okay, absolutely.
So back. Oh, back. Yeah, here. Yeah. Minimal magnetic field. Solid line. So are you absolutely sure that this lowest energy state is when everything is aligned, or this could be something different? Just share your suspicion, especially for antiferromagnetic.
So the solid line is the weakest magnetic field on this figure. So I would make an assumption that as the magnetic field strength approaches closer to 0, that we would be less and less certain that the lowest energy state or the lowest energy state would be the ferromagnetic all aligned with the magnetic field.
Good. Excellent. So now let's we are finished first and third with fundamentals, and the next third will be about thermal properties, where the next speaker is Chamberlain, Samara Wickerman.
Okay. Hi everyone. So I'm going to talk about the impact of temperature on heat capacity on ruthenium chloride at negative spin-spin coupling. So for a quick introduction, ruthenium-3+ has only one unpaired electron in its 4d5 subshell. So the unpaired electrons in the RuCl3 2d lattice could be either collinearly oriented or arranged in the opposite directions or disoriented. So ferromagnetism arises when they are arranged in the same direction. So this equation, as shown in this equation, we can find the heat capacity by getting the derivative of internal energy over temperature. So moving on to the methodology, the input parameters should be set as shown in the screenshot here. So it is set to -J, and first I selected the magnetic field of 0.001. The external magnetic field. So, and then the program was run on MATLAB and the graphical representation, the graphs were obtained. So after that, I set the B for the external magnetic field for 0.01 and 0.0001 and repeated the procedure. So these are the results I got. So here we can see at when the external magnetic field equals 0.001, we can see a very smooth variation of heat capacity to spin-spin coupling. Heat capacity versus temperature to spin-spin coupling. So we can clearly see that in the first graph that the system does not accept heat. The system does not accept heat at very low and very high temperatures. So as we decrease the external magnetic field by 10 times, we get narrower peaks, and the peaks are less intense too. So we can kind of explain this like this. So at minimum temperature, the spins are oriented in the same direction. So we can say it's an ordered state. And when we increase the temperature, the thermal energy, it overrides the spin-spin interactions and the magnetic interactions. So the system becomes disturbed and the coupling becomes irrelevant. So at a very high temperature, at infinite temperature, the spins are completely random and each spin will have a finite entropy. So the entropy will be a constant, which means the free energy of the system from which the heat capacity could be derived from becomes minimum. So when we increase the temperature, we can say that the heat capacity decays and plateaus with increasing temperature. So then just to compare with literature, I just shared this graph here from a paper I saw. So we can see that the peak intensity and the peak width decreases with decreasing B, the external magnetic field, at negative spin-spin coupling. I also included the relationships of energy and magnetization versus temperature for all three B values. So here we can clearly see that there's the phase transition occurs from here to here. It's a rapid, drastic increase in magnetization. The phase transition from ferromagnetic to paramagnetic occurs around 1000 to 1500 Kelvin approximately here. So the graphs of magnetization versus temperature and internal energy versus temperature for all three systems, they kind of compare. So these are the conclusions I drew from this procedure. The heat capacity increases upon increasing temperature and decays at very high temperatures. A smooth variation of heat capacity for external magnetic field 0.001. We could see that at there was a smooth variation of heat capacity for a negative spin for B equals 0.001, and also the peak width and intensity decreased with decreased B. And also we could see that the phase transition from ferromagnetic to paramagnetic occurred around 1000 to 1500 Kelvin.
Okay.
So I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge Professor Killian and the classmates for sharing their knowledge and guiding through the project. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, you can ask now.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So, any questions in class? So we started uploading over the schedule. Any questions on the line? So I have a brief one. Can you please flip a couple of slides back? Yeah, here. Forward, 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 forward. Can you please flip forward, forward, forward? Stop.
Here?
Yes. So in your lower panels, why energy increases as you increase the temperature, and why it stabilizes near zero? Just how do you interpret it?
Near zero?
Yes. So you see your energy goes from minus 0.04 and then it approaches zero, right?
Yes.
So what happened? Why energy grows with temperature and why it approaches zero?
Because the entropy is released.
And can you explain it on the language of microstates? Like which microstate will be activated when temperature equals infinity?
So at minimum temperature, there's only one microstate.
Okay, and at maximal temperature?
I'm not sure.
Would you agree that it will be all microstates activated approximately equally?
Equally?
Yes. And half of them have positive energy, half of them have negative energy?
I can say that they are not activated equally.
Okay, but there will be a larger number of states activated. So in class, John agrees. He is nodding to this. Can you please comment how you just help channel your view on this?
I think that as you increase the temperature, I guess in this case up to 4,000 Kelvin, the distribution of state probably approach something fairly symmetric. So everything of negative energy values would cancel out with everything of positive.
Channel, what do you think of this statement by John? Does that look realistic?
It makes sense, yeah.
Okay. More questions to Channel? Yes,
on the graph that you're currently showing, and in your table in your project, you show that there is. Yes, this is fine. Can you explain? Yes. Can you explain the spike in magnetizations at approximately 500 Kelvin, or B is equal to 1,000? Top half.
Is that at the ground state?
Then, if it is, can you explain why it decreases for a weaker value of B?
Dr. Killian, I cannot hear properly. Could you?
Sorry, I will talk louder. So in your on this slide, at B is 0, 0, 1
0, 0, 1, okay.
on your magnetization versus
Yeah.
graph. You have a spike before
Yes.
the curve, and
Yeah.
you have a similar spike on the B is 0, 0, 0, 1, and no similar spike on 0, B is equal.
Oh, yeah, now I get it. It's probably, I'm sorry, I cannot give an exact answer because I'm not sure about it.
You can try it and maybe start thinking in the direction whether the spikes will stay here or disappear if you increase sampling of microstates. If you use more than 20,000 microstates.
And Dr. Killens, will you agree with the statement that this is an artifact of the limited number of calculations we have performed?
So let me help so we can go forward. John, can you comment on this? Okay, so we used a limited number of microstates, right? And sometimes they're not sufficient to represent a realistic situation. So especially the peak in the magnetization can be shown not maximal, not -16, but something bigger, if the procedure that John has described failed to find the ground state. So for insufficient number of trials, ground state was not found, and it gives this numerical error. Chamli, does it sound realistic to you?
Okay. Okay.
Steven, does it sound realistic to you?
Yes.
Okay. More
Thank
questions.
you.
More questions to Chamli? 1, 2, 3. If no, let's thank Jay once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next presenter is Faiz. So,
hi everyone, my name is Faiz, and today I'll be talking about my section in the project, which is temperature effect on heat capacity and excitation state of ruthenium chloride at J equals 0. I'll be talking briefly about a brief introduction, move my talk to methods, results, and conclusion. So ruthenium chloride is a layered van der Waals material with optomagnetic effects potentials. It has a small cleavage of energy, and each ruthenium atom is covalently bonded to 3 atoms of a chloride, and the spatial orientation is laying and stacking on a corner of honeycomb lattice. In this study, we assume that the effect of temperature on heat capacity and excitation states of ruthenium chloride at J equals 0 would be systematic. So the method, all the mathematical equation we performed were on MATLAB, in which we used a code to scan a temperature effect at J equals 0 utilizing a Monte Carlo simulation fashion, which is a computational algorithm used when a complex and exhaustive mathematical model under use screen many variation in random sampling process. So generally what we found is that scan of temperature showed consistency with the Corey-West law. When we applied external magnetic field and manipulate the value of the magnetic field B while fixing the constant J coupling. To ensure all electrons are paired, we found that, for example, at P equals 1 to the power of -3, the temperature of two spin-spin coupling ratio start to flatten around 2 arbitrary unit, and the peak is wider and highly intense. In comparison to a 1,000-fold larger B value, the peak is lower in intensity, and T to J ratio starts to flatten around 1.5 arbitrary units. That could be an indication that all the paired electrons are not releasing entropy, or either it can release entropy in a like a double state or double releasing of the entropy. So we conclude that it is clear that heat capacity of ruthenium chloride is dependent on temperature and magnetization, which is backed and proved by experiments in the literature. And wider peaks can be generated by employing smaller B values, and opposed to that, sharper peaks can be generated from larger B values. And that's all what I have.
Okay, please join me in thanking Faiz Al-Ghali. So, any questions in the past? Any questions online? Questions 1, questions 2, questions 3. I think everyone was very happy and satisfied with your presentation. Yeah, thank you, Faiz. So, Sharon, and next presenter is Ishi Chan. So,
hello everyone, my name is Ishu Qian. Today I will talk about the heat capacity study of fractionalized excitations in ruthenium-3 chloride. So based on the study from Tremelli and Faiz, I keep on the anti-ferromagnetic models. So ethylene humantinate is a mathematical model of the ferromagnetisms in statistical mechanisms. The model consists of discrete vibrators that represent magnetic dipole moments of atomic springs that can be in 1 or 2 states, so +1 or -1. In my model, I set my J value as the positive 0.001, and the interaction between the dipoles cause a magnetic ordering such that the vector sum of the spontaneous magnetizations of the substance vanishes, which defines at the antiferromagnetic state. So this figures is from the one of the papers, and this literature, it compares their experiment result with the theoretic model running result. So the blue line in the figure, which is the result like the 0 external magnetic fields, and the green line is the experimental record from their papers. So they get generally it follow the same trend of the experiment to the same as the ferroradix, but without the peaks, so which means there's no heat entropy released. And also they ran the coding of the temperature dependence of heat capacity of the spring excitations in the ruthenium-3 chloride, which is similar as what I got. So from my experiments, I changed the spring B values from 0.001 and 0.01 and 0.1 to see what's the difference between based on the spring numbers. When the B is increased and the peaks will be increased as higher temperatures, and the intensity of the peaks also increased with the B increased. The orange line represent the paramagnetic results as the reference to my anti-ferromagnetic experiments. So for the conclusion, based on the temperature dependence, the heat capacity with the temperature increase and then drops, which is because by the low temperature ammonia as being delivered from conventional spring degrees of freedoms, and the high temperature ammonia could indicate the Majorana fragments of the Katavi spring liquid. And the peak in the figure with the B increase at higher temperature. The intensity of the peaks also increased with the spring B increased. Those is caused by the ammonias are of similar nature and are related to the domains with the slightly different stacking order. And that's all for my presentation.
So any questions in the audience? Or maybe healthy comrade criticism? Any?
Just clarification. Maybe this is something I just didn't stumble onto, but what are Majorana fermions? Majorana.
I think Steven is the one of the person in the class who can answer.
Steven? Sorry.
Majorana fermions are a virtual particle that arises from the interaction between states at low temperature.
What are their spins? What is the spin of Majorana?
People have.
I would check.
Wait, so not all fermions have a spin of 1 half? Or this is a special case?
It is a special
Sure,
case.
okay.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. So, any Steven, you figured and discussed with John more questions to each in the class, in the audience, or in the online. So each I have one critical comment. Would you please go back a couple of slides? Back. One more back. So let me attract the attention of everyone in the class to this figure and maybe look on the labels. So what is labeled here and there? Which transition metal? Are they the same or different? Ichi?
They are different.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And are they? You mentioned maybe by mistake that the one is theory and other is calculation. Would you agree that both of them are experimental measurements?
Okay. Yeah. I made mistake right here. Yeah.
Okay, so the one with rhenium is same ionic radius, same very similar atomic weight, but it doesn't have antiferromagnetic ordering. And then
Yeah.
heat capacity goes by Debye model that you studied in the first 2 months of the class, right? This Professor Burkhout, because of oscillations of nuclei. And ruthenium has very similar mass. It repeats the same curve, but in addition, there is a very sharp spike below 10 Kelvin because of change of magnetic model. So it is one experiment is reference to another experiment. And it was not a question, it was just basically like some suggestion for improvement if you do revision of the paper. Okay, and can you please go forward? One more. Yes. And the peak in the panel C that teacher has computed agrees qualitatively with the experimental data of magnetic ordering in the heat capacity. And it is main achievement that each has obtained through her model, which is really impressive. Okay, more questions to Ichi? If no, what questions? What questions? No questions. Let's thank for once again. The next presenter is Jin Yang Sun.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Qin Yang Sun. It's my great honor to give this presentation. My topic is scanning magnetic field response to the magnetic field in ruthenium chloride emission model. For G is the negative value. First, I want to do the introduction. Spontaneous magnetization is the occurrence of an ordered spin state at zero applied magnetic field in a ferromatic or ferromatic materials below a critical point called the Curie temperature or TC. Here is the picture. We can see from the imaging, with the temperature increase, the magnetization decrease. When the temperature reached to the Curie temperature, the magnetization reaches to zero. That in order to prove the ferromatic material has the spontaneous magnetization effect, we have to get the four figures. First is the magnetization as a function of magnetic field. To get this feature, we use the equation 1. Second one is the change of magnetization in response to magnetic field. It is also called the susceptibility. We get this feature, we use the equation 2. Third is the energy as a function of a magnetic field. And fourth is the change of energy in response to magnetic field. We use the equation 3 to get this to calculate these two features. The specific procedure is to fix temperature as to be constant and scan the volume of magnetic field and record the energy and magnetization and report the derivative of the energy and the magnetization over the magnetic field. Here's the result I got. For the figure 1 is the magnetization as a function of magnetic field for various temperature. As we can see, at all temperature, the magnetization approaches maximal value of minus 16 in the limit of the higher magnetic field. From the T equals 1600 to 1200, there is a critical value of B, the magnetic field at which the magnetization becomes maximal growth with the temperature. Also, at higher temperature at high temperature, the magnetization at zero, the magnetic field is zero. In contrast, for the temperature is 300 and 600, the magnetization is minus 60 at zero magnetic field. The A imaging is corresponds to the ordered state, and the D imaging is corresponds to the disordered state. Second feature is the change of the magnetization in response to the magnetic field for various temperatures. We can see at all temperatures, the susceptibility equals to zero. In the higher limit of a higher magnetic field, the critical value of B at which the susceptibility becomes fluctuating up and down with the decrease of magnetic field. At a low temperature, the susceptibility almost one line, but at high temperature there is a peak. For the third feature is the imaging as a function of the magnetic field for various temperatures. At all temperatures, the energy has the same changing tendency with the increase of the magnetic field. The energy decrease with the magnetic increasing. The energy is inversely proportional with the magnetic field. And below the critical volume of the magnetic field, the slope is larger than that of above the critical value of magnetic field, because the thermal activation cannot compete with the magnetic interaction anymore. The first one is the change of the energy in response to magnetic field for various temperature. We can see at all temperature, change of the energy in response to magnetic has the same tendency with the increasing of magnetic field, and the change of the energy in response to magnetic approaches to minus 20 at a higher magnetic field, and the critical value of magnetic field at which the change of the energy in response to respect to magnetic approaches to the lowest point, and increases gradually to reach to minus 20 at 0 and 2 point. It will be 2. And the conclusion, temperature has a significant impact on the magnetization and susceptibility. Below the critical temperature, an ordered spin at 0 applied magnetic field appeared, and the calculation were able to observe the spontaneous magnetization effect. It is a big achievement. Thank you.
Okay. But we still should upload. Thank you, Xingyang. Any questions in the class? Any questions online? If no, let me ask quite a brief question. So, can you flip maybe 2 slides back? One more? Yeah, here, forward. Yeah. So, in the limit of high level of magnetic field, this derivative of energy in respect to magnetic field, is it zero or constant? It's already written, but can you please comment on this? Is the change of energy in respect to magnetic field the quantities that you are showing here? Does it is in limiting case the next slide? Yeah. Here, this lines here is zero or constant, and explain why.
It is a constant, not zero.
Why?
Because we can see this is from the third figure, the slope. The slope is exactly the figure 4, and we can see in higher temperature. In the higher magnetic field, the slope here is about -20, and we can see the slope here is larger than this one. The below the critical magnetic field, this value is larger than this one, and we can correspond. It corresponds to this part. Is because it is a minus, so this one is below, and then it should to -20 again.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. Any more questions online? If you do have questions, please speak. Question 1, question 2, question 3. Please join me in thanking. And the next presenter is Peyman Karyevchi.
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Peyman. I study the scanning magnetic field response with respect to radiation of magnetic field for magnetic material, in which the spin has been properly very clear. So let's begin with some principles here. The response of material to an external magnetic field contributes to magnetization. There are different types of material with respect to magnetization. One of them is paramagnetic materials. And in paramagnetic materials, we can see weak induced magnetization in the magnetic field. The important factor is susceptibility, which magnetic susceptibility is a measure of how much of the material will become magnetized in an applied magnetic field. So for paramagnetic materials, we have a Course law. In many paramagnetic materials, regarding to the Course law, magnetization is proportional to an applied magnetic field, which is shown by a linear function here. M is magnitude of the resulting magnetization, and H is magnitude of the applied magnetic field. And susceptibility is also a function of temperature in a fixed magnetic field. Magnetic susceptibility is proportional to the temperature, which is a hyperbola function. Which means if temperature is lower, the magnetization increases. We simulate the lattice of ruthenium chloride in MATLAB. Our assumption, or basic assumption, is that a honeycomb in a honeycomb lattice of ruthenium chloride, we choose 2 atoms in the honeycomb lattice, and we distribute the. We consider those atoms as a canonical ensemble with random distribution of nucleus space. And in each simulation, the temperature is considered as a fixed value. So here is my results. In the left-hand side picture, we can see the magnetization with respect to the magnetic field for different temperatures. The left figure shows the change of magnetization in respect to the slope of the line in low magnetic fields is calculated for each temperature. Magnetization for a small magnetic field is proportional to the magnetic field, as I said before in the last two slides, which is consistent to the Curry's law. The right-hand side figure shows the calculated suspectibility, which fits nicely in the hyperbola function. And as you see, the results are consistent with the Curry's law. In this figure, we can see the effect of magnetic field on the suspectibility. As it's seen, when the temperature increases, the minimum of the plot is shifted toward higher magnetic fields. In low magnetic fields, it is seen that the suspectibility is proportional to the magnetic field. And I calculated the slope for each temperature. Also, by increasing the temperature, the slope increases. Meanwhile, in higher temperatures, the minimum of the plot is shifted to large magnetic fields. Regarding to the Curry's law, suspectibility is inversely proportional to the temperature. And suspectibility, in this figure, as you see, suspectibility begins from 0 and then decreases to a minimum value, which almost the same for all temperatures, and then increases to the 0 and stays constant. In this figure, I plotted the average energy with respect to the magnetic field. Regarding to the figures, the average energy with respect to change of magnetic field are similar for all cases in the higher magnetic fields, except for the low magnitudes. The external point of plot in starting region is shifted toward high values of magnetic field by increasing temperature. In high values of magnetic field, the curve converges to a line, and as you see, the slope of the line for all the plots are similar, and it shows it kind of does not depend on the temperature. Average energy of the system, so we can conclude that the average energy of the system does not depend on the magnetic field. It does not depend on the temperature in high magnetic fields. Beyond the threshold value, the relation of average energy to magnetic field is nonlinear in a starting region in the low magnetic fields. However, for large magnetic fields, average energy is proportional to the magnitude, and there is a linear relation. In the last plot, in the last figure, I plotted the derivation of the energy to the magnetic field. As you see, after a threshold value, the derivative of energy stays constant, which means energy is linearly dependent on the magnetic field in large magnitudes. The minimum point of the plot is shifted toward larger magnetic fields by increasing the temperature. In low values of magnetic field, it is seen that the slope of the plot decreases in higher temperature. So as conclusion, magnetization of a paramagnetic material is proportional to an applied magnetic field for low magnitudes. The slope of magnetization with respect to magnetic field decreases by increasing temperature. Therefore, magnetization is in a paramagnetic material is inversely proportional to temperature. Also, relation of suspectability and applied magnetic field is almost linear in low magnitudes. And the last conclusion, average energy of the system has linear relation to magnetic fields in large magnitudes. These are my references, and thank you for your listening.
Thank you, Payman, for presenting, and paper is open for discussion. Anyone in class? Anyone online? Let me offer something for the discussion. Would you please go to forward? Yeah, here. So I do not have exact formulation, but please comment or confirm that as magnetic field increases, magnetization increases as well, goes from 0 to whatever negative value. And you can use your microphone probably. No.
So you mean I should explain?
Just confirm if verbally how magnetization changes with increase of magnetic field.
Okay. So as you see, I calculated. Thank you. I calculated the slope of each figure for each temperature, and in the starting point, which means in a low magnetic field, the relation of magnetization and the change of magnetic field is linear. So I calculate the slope, which means, and the slope of the magnetization with respect to magnetic field is suspectability. So the amount of this slope is equal to suspectability. And then I plotted the suspectability with respect to temperature. And these 4 points are my data. The curve is the theta function for all of these 4 points. And actually I should have put the equation for this plot in Excel, but I don't know why I cannot do that. But the regression that I got was to power 0.95, which is kind of close to the negative 1. And we know, based on the Corey's law here, we know that the suspectability is the function of temperature to the power negative 1. So my results are consistent with the Corey's law.
Okay, but here is the actual question. And it is question both to Payman and to everyone in the class. Please, we will be done very quickly, very soon, but please try to concentrate and think actively. In which situation magnetization as function of magnetic field will be 0, will not change? What should we do so that magnetization will not change as we increase magnetic field?
So based on this, what I guess in 5 magnetic fields, it does not depend on the magnetization does not depend on the magnetic field. And also by increasing the temperature, you can see that threshold value increases.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. You told everything correct, but it is a preparation to be attentive to the next talk. Any other ideas or suggestions for if you want to echo? Just share.
If magnitude of magnetization is the same, in an increasing the plasma, we would also need to increase temperature, as according to Payman's paper, equations 1 and 2. We can derive that the magnitude of magnetization M is equal to C, which is a constant of the temperature
And I would like everyone to start paying attention to the talks, the last but not least talk that we'll be following, which are other conditions that no one of us mentioned for magnetic field not changing magnetization. So it will be quite surprising and unusual. So, any more questions to Payman, online or in class? If no, please join me thanking him once again. Thank you, Payman, and everyone is Payman person is welcome to stop sharing. And the next presenter is Tyler. Okay, I see you are sharing.
So my project was on magnetic accessibility of the 2D antiferromagmatics with the chloride, alpha chloride. Some things to be aware of in this project is the magnetic accessibility, which gives off if the X is negative, then the magnetic field will be weaker. But if the X is positive, the magnetic field will be stronger or strengthened. Magnetic field that is B is a vector field that describes the magnetic influence on moving electric charges, electric currents, and magnetic materials. And some part of that is B field, which is the force of a moving charged particle. Magnetization, which is M, is the total magnetic moment. J, which is I'm holding constant here, is a spin interaction constant. And KBT in this project is essentially temperature. In the project, this is the code I used pretty much. I held J at 0.001, and the values of K I had were at 900, 600, and 200 Kelvin. When I used this for 900, 600, and 200, I found with the magnetization versus the magnetic field, with a decreasing temperature, the magnetization resistant, which can be seen in the 200 more clearly, and the slope got even steeper to reach the low part of the magnetization even sooner, since it's around 2,900, around 1,500 and 600 Kelvin, and it's at 1,000 when it's at 200 Kelvin. It's something similar when it's the accessibility versus the B field spin coupling ratio, but in the parabola, in the 900 Kelvin, the accessibility goes down to under 2. Wow. And it's at the B field at B, and it goes back up. 600 is lower than -2 and 4, and there's it's similar to the 900 Kelvin one. Other than that, but the 200 Kelvin one, there is a lot of resistance to wanting to go downwards, and it's much lower than previous ones, and there's a odd value out right at the top right there, which makes the graph a little bigger and wonkier. And pretty much the decreased temperature leads to increased resistance of the magnetization, and this is with the J being greater than 0. And that is all I have. Is there any questions?
Unmute and let's clap once again. Okay. Any questions to Tyler, or questions, or maybe just comments of how you impressed, or if you see any scientific value or like paradoxes posed or resolved? Any comments or questions in class? Any comments or questions online?
I do.
Yes, please.
Just have one. So I noticed that on the slide we're on, for the temperature 900 and the temperature 600, is the orange the fit and the blue the actual data points?
Yeah, it looks like the blue is the actual data point but the fit and the actual data points are so similar on 900 and 600. It's only going to
orange
tell that they're different in the 200.
Okay, so I guess my question, it looks like on the 200 Kelvin, the orange is a little stepwise. Do you think that's just because of the randomness of the blue points kind of evening out, or do you think there might be something more there?
From what I can gather, it is just the randomness of the blue points. It is a lot of it's in every 200 graph I've found that there's a lot of randomness going on.
Okay, so, thank you very much.
Any more? Steven, do you have any comments? So let's keep this problem a little bit. So Tyler partially addressed it, but we can keep it partially open to next year class. So you see that for temperature 200, the slope from 0 to, let's say, 300 Kelvin is almost 0, right?
Yeah.
Which in previous talk by Payman, in order to achieve 0 slope of magnetization to magnetic field, one needs to increase temperature. Here it works otherwise. You decrease temperature and you get 0 slope. So definitely there is something non-trivial. And Tyler partially addressed it with verbal language of system is resisting to external attempt to change its magnetization. Okay, with this, let me thank all attendees, all presenters, all attendees, all who asked questions, and all who provided maybe questions and improvement suggestions in secret, or provided some materials for all of us, like Steven. We will depart and finish in a minute, but maybe since Payman reached us, we can do one more high resolution photograph, maybe with a cell phone, and everyone will get very strong credit for this presentation because you did something outstanding, and when you will learn about it, you will not regret. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm clapping mentally, and I just my hands are busy with holding camera, but thank you everyone.